Hello, everyone. How you guys doing today? Welcome to today's Zoom session. My name is Ezekiel Jordan, and today we will be hearing from Texas State Career Service Advisor, Daphne Wolfe. Daphne is a Texas A&M graduate, and she also got her master's degree from the University of Georgia. Go Bulldogs. Just kidding, just kidding. All right, but Daphne, you can go ahead and tell them a little bit about yourself, and the floor is all yours.
Thank you so much. I'm so happy to be here. For my first Mass Comm week, I just started this role in August, and so I'm really excited to be here at Texas State. I'm still getting to know the Mass Comm faculty and staff, so I appreciate your patience, but I am really happy to be here, and we're going to be talking about resumes today. So thank you for taking your Friday afternoon to be learning about this, but I promise it'll be worth it. And by Monday morning, I hope that I have a few appointments scheduled with some of you folks, just to take another look at it, because as we're going to talk about, having another set of eyes and having somebody else to review it and somebody else in your corner is always a good thing. So I'm going to go ahead and get started and share my screen. Sweet. I want today to be really conversational, so I'm going to try to keep my eye out on the chat, and I know Zeke is going to help me out with that. But we are going to be talking about crafting your resume. So we are going to be starting basically from the ground up. So if you have a really good basis of your resume already, just take some of the finer tune points, and apply some of those to your resume. So getting started. So the three things that I always try to stress when I talk to students about their resumes is I want that their formatting and the content throughout their resume needs to be really clear, consistent, and concise. That's what I call the 3 C's. And I'll say those words throughout this entire presentation multiple times. That's how important they are, right? So by clear, I want you to have a really easy to read format. I want you to make a really smart choice on your fonts, and making making your resume read really smoothly and the flow really good. So consistent. So what I mean by that is again a lot more formatting things. So if you're going to use periods at the end of your bullet points, making sure that you use it on every single one of them. If you're going to use bold to describe, your title, it needs to be on every single experience that you're describing. Making sure that the tense of your verbs and your sentences are all correct and consistent. Concise means that your bullet points are going to be specific, quantifiable, and really to the point, so that we know exactly what you're learning, the accomplishments that you've gained, and the skills that you've learned throughout those experiences. So I'm going to come back to these themes throughout all of it. So really, this is important. So backing up to just the basics. I hear all the time, how long should my resume be? The rule of thumb is that it needs to be 1 full page. Depending upon your experience, we can add a page. If you're applying to grad school, it's likely to be 2 pages. So there are some exceptions to that, which would be a federal resume, which we're not going to get into today, but I can definitely help you if you're applying to any of those types of jobs. Your font size needs to be easy to read. So I've gotten resumes, they're filled to the brim with information, and they're in like 0.8 font. And like, I'd consider myself a young gal, but even my eyes have struggled reading that. And so I like to make sure that your font size doesn't go below 10-point font. It really needs to be between 10 to 12-point font. And then the exception is your name, of course. Easy to read fonts. Your margin sizes needs to be consistent all the way around. This can be your margins can be a really big space saver. So keeping that in mind, if you have a lot of content, you might want to widen those margins to 0.5 of an inch. Being consistent with your line spacing, bolding and underlining and italicizing. And then making sure you're organizing your resume really effectively. And this is the key way that you can actually make your resume really specific for each job that you're applying for, and I'll talk about that later on. The only hard and fast rule, which I'll say again later, is that your job experience needs to be in reverse chronological order, meaning your most recent experience needs to be listed first. I'll talk about verbs and how to choose those verbs later on. And last but not least, actually most important, making sure you're tailoring your resume specifically for each position, which I will describe later on in this presentation. So some essential components that you need to make sure you're including will be your heading. You need to have your name on there, your education, experience, any involvement. Those are kind of the key areas, and I'll go over some other optional areas later on, which you can break down those sections even more specifically. But I also want you to consider including an objective statement, a summary of qualifications, any projects or coursework that you do that you're really, really proud of. You guys do great work and really have some real life experience projects throughout your classes in Mass Comm and journalism. And so I think it's really important for you to make sure that you're showcasing that experience on your resume as well. Other things you can include is any study abroad trips or honors and awards. So when everything is said and done, this can be an example of what your resume could look like, you know, really clear bullet points. It's going to have, you know, consistent italicized. One thing I really want to point out is all of the dates on this one are all right aligned, which makes it really clear of how long you've been employed somewhere, any gaps in your employment history and things like that. So I think this is a great, you know, overall format for setting up your resume. Now I'm going to break down each of those components that I've talked about. And so again, if you have any questions, feel free to stop me and just ask those, because if you have that question, somebody else definitely has that question. So feel free, and I want you to feel empowered to make sure that you're getting an answer right then and there. So your name, like I mentioned before, needs to be between 14 to 18 point font. It is quite important. So making sure you're putting that nice and bold at the top. Your contact information, you at least need your email address and your phone number. And I would also, at minimum, include the city in which you're in currently when you're applying for a job. You can include your full address. That's definitely up to you. Some people don't feel like it's necessary, but do include at least where you're physically located now, just in case the job or internship you're applying for requires you to move. That's one way an employer might know that, hey, we might need to talk about a later start date because they need to relocate because they're moving from San Marcos all the way to North Carolina, right? That's a pretty big move, and so, you know, making sure your employer knows at least where you're physically located for the time being can be really important. So these are two optional sections, and as I mentioned, these will go in order on your resume. So optional sections, you can include them, you cannot. It doesn't matter. It's however you feel like is best for you to organize your resume and how you can put the most relevant information closest to the top where they're going to see it, right? So an objective statement is saying that you, it's just a brief statement saying what type of work and what skills and strengths you're bringing to an organization you're working for. I find objective statements are the most helpful to use if you were at a career fair and you're applying to a variety of different firms, right? Saying that I'm seeking an internship in the summer of 2021 where I can do social media marketing, or I can do account management or something like that. Being really specific about what you're seeking out of the experience. That's when I find objective statements really helpful. Summary of qualifications is going to be more like a conglomerate of your experiences. I think it's really awesome. This is something that's really great when you have a variety of experiences. So maybe you are really dedicated to a student organization. you have a part-time job as like a barista at Starbucks, let's say. I was a barista at Starbucks, that's why I use that example. You're really dedicated to a student, or you're a barista at Starbucks, and maybe you've had an internship in the industry that you're wanting to go into, right? A summary of qualifications can be like a hodgepodge of all of those best skills and things that you've learned from those experiences, all in one section. So in this one, it says proactive leader and communicator with excellent attention to detail. Demonstrated ability to seek answers and conceptualize the big picture, ability to work independently as well as part of a team. So those are all things that you could have gotten out of any of those experiences, or all of them combined, right? We know that experiences and skills don't all materialize out of one specific experience, and so this is a great way for you to showcase some of the skills that you have from a variety of standpoints. So now we're going to break it down into like gathering information, identifying your skills, organizing your resume, and then reviewing it. So this first part is going to be gathering information. I think this is the part that's going to take up the most amount of time in the sense of you like figuring out what you even want to put on there. So my pro tip is keeping a draft of all of your accomplishments, all your student organizations, all your volunteer experience, all your coursework projects, anything like that that you feel like you could pull from later, having them all in one big resume, so that when you are trying to tailor your resume later, you can just pull specific experiences that might be relevant to that. So breaking this down, so your education section, I think is so important, because your education is something that will stay on your resume forever. Different experiences might change, but your degree and your level of education can never be diminished or taken away throughout your whole career. So always have Texas State University on there. If you're doing a Bachelor of Arts or Bachelor of Science, make sure that you are spelling it out. Don't abbreviate it as BS or BA in whatever major. Making sure you're being specific, and again, not abbreviating any majors. So I've seen this before. I don't want to see Bachelor of Science in Mass Comm. It's Mass Communications is your degree title. So making sure you're spelling it all out. I know it's a long word. It might run onto a different line, but being really specific is important. You're going to want to include your GPA. Many companies will want you to have a 3.0. And so making sure that you are putting, if you have a 3.2 GPA, making sure you're putting 3.2 out of 4.0, just so that folks know the scale of how you're grading yourself, or how the university gives you that grade. Any relevant coursework you can also include under your education section, and as well as study abroad. I didn't put that on here, but that's another caveat that can go under your education. So your experiences, this can be a variety of things. So experiences that you might want to include in your resume are not exclusive to paid experiences. I think that's something that students often forget, is that it could be a family event that you're doing. It could be taking care of family. It could be caregiving for grandparents or family members. That is still experience, and it still has skills that you can include on your resume. In addition to any work experiences, leadership roles, organizations, memberships, if you're a part of a professional organization, nationwide professional organization, anything like that, volunteer experiences, research projects, presentations, poster presentations, things like that. Those are all really important for you to have written down, at least in one place. And then we are also going to be including the position titles. So if you were, like, just going back to my Starbucks role, right? I was a barista. So making sure you know exactly the role. If you were in a leadership position, say like vice president of communications, making sure you write that down and have that notated somewhere. The organization or company name, and this is one that everyone forgets, is including the location of where you did that job. Even if it's, you know, built into the organization's name, like Austin Media Company, I don't know, I just made that up. Even if we probably can infer that that was in Austin, Texas, people, if you're applying to a job in New York, they might not know that. So making sure you're putting the location and also noting when you were employed. I talked about a gap in employment earlier, and so as you get older, it's going to and have more experience in the field, having consistent employment or consistent membership or consistent role somewhere is going to be important moving forward. And I say, you know, making sure that you're putting everything down at least in a draft resume, because when you get further away from college, if you're 3 or 4 years out and you're considering a position change, or you are considering volunteering your time somewhere, and they ask for your resume, and you're going to want to pull all of those volunteer experiences that you did in college, but now you're 3 or 4 years out and you're like, man, I don't even remember like what I had for dinner last night. Like, I don't know. I can't remember, like, what was that organization called? You know, how many people were there? Like, I don't know, like maybe 20. So if you have it all written down somewhere, it takes the guesswork out of it. And so having it all, you know, easy for you to access later on, having it someplace that you're going to be able to rely on, either in like a Google Drive, a shared drive, somewhere in the cloud, having it somewhere that's easy to access so that you can also just share it whenever you need it. So this is identifying the skills. So this is kind of getting into the nitty-gritty of writing those bullet points. So these are some really good reflection questions to ask yourself. I'm not going to go through them, but if you look back at this recording later, we really want you to identify who, what, when, where, and why, and how did you do those things. Those basic questions. We want to know who you're serving, what did you do, what actions did you take, did this happen daily, weekly, monthly? Where did these duties occur? Were you working autonomously, or were you working a part of a team? Why were you trying to do this? What was the goal? Did you accomplish that goal? Those are all questions that you want to ask whenever you're talking about the purpose of your jobs and explaining those experiences. Because we don't just want to know what you did. We don't want to know what the job description says. We want to know what you learned and how you can translate that into a different job and different experience. What did you get out of it? What did you learn? So this is a really quick, easy formula for creating a bullet point. So action verbs can be found on our website. If you go to the resources tab, you'll find a whole list of them, and they're broken down by like job responsibility. So if you are a teacher, if you are working in finance, if you're working in a retail job, we have those all broken down so that you can utilize those action verbs to describe the responsibility that you had, right? And so you're going to take that action verb, you're going to, you know, add on what you did, what were the job responsibilities, and then how and why you were doing them. So what were those results and outcomes? And we want to make sure that you're quantifying when you can. Again, that's saying how many people you served, how often you served them, or how many clients you worked with, how much product did you put out, whatever that means for you, whatever situation. So this is a basic resume sample. So thinking if you're a member of the American Marketing Association, the first one is, and you're just a member, which is great experience to add onto your resume, is created personal brand. That's essentially just what you did, right? But you're not telling me anything about why you did it, what Did it result in you getting a job? Did more people find your LinkedIn profile? I don't know what that means, right? And so I really like how it was shared in this after version. Whenever we talk about utilizing an action verb, the what you did and then the results, it changed it to enhance skills for future successes and created own personal brand shared with 12 area employers. So that's a really clear, detailed description of who, what, when, where, and why you created a personal brand. So making sure you're not encouraging vagueness through your things, through your bullet points. If I were an employer and I was like created personal brand, I'd be like, why? And then I'd be like, oh, I don't really want to look any further to find out the answer to that question, right? And so they might put your resume on the no pile whenever they're going through it the first time and saying like, oh, this person didn't connect the dots of why that was important to it, to our job. So I'm not going to spend any more time on them. And that's something we want to avoid. So we already talked about utilizing action verbs. You can find that on the Career Services website. I wanted to talk about past and present tense verbs. Like I'm a middle school teacher trying to, hammer this into your mind. And I'm sorry that I'm going to be annoying about it, but this is really important. So present tense verbs are verbs that you would use in a role that you are currently in, or a position that you're currently in. So you're going to be using those ing verbs. Past tense verbs is when you are not currently in that role. So you'd be utilizing a lot of that ed verbs. And this is important because this is how I know when a student has not updated their resume in a while, is they'll send it to me and they'll have a new position put on there and it's great and it is, explained really well. But then they change the date of their previous role or their previous internship experience, but they didn't change the verbs. And when I review that, if I were looking at that as an employer standpoint, it looks really sloppy. And so that line that says, attention to detail, I'm like, well, you weren't that detail oriented because you would have used the correct verb tense if you were. And so thinking through things that are going to stand out to an employer, those are those consistency things. So making sure you are utilizing past and present tense verbs. I know I'm going to get off my soapbox now, sorry. So quantifying, I talked about that it can be a dollar amount, it can be the number of products you sold, the times you did something, percentage increases of productivity or efficiency, anything like that. Those are especially important to quantify. You want to utilize those keywords from the job description or from the organization that you're applying for. So this is getting into tailoring your resume specifically for a job, making sure you're utilizing those buzzwords that the company utilizes themselves. Not every company uses the same word for things, so making sure you're being very company specific. You can even utilize some of the action verbs that are on the job description as your action verbs in your resume. That's something I really, really like when students do, is they kind of mirror the job description in their resume. I think it's really impressive because you want to connect the dots for the employer. And so that's a really good way to do it. And then again, consistency, making sure you're formatting your experiences all the same way. I'm going to harp on this again, and because it's another way that I've seen students get sloppy in the past, is that if you have a bullet point at the end of your sentence, if you have a period at the end of your bullet point, excuse me, so sorry, then make sure you have a period at the end of every single bullet point. If you go back and you insert an experience later on and you don't add a period at the end of your bullet point, it's not consistent. It starts to look sloppy. So making sure that you're being really consistent with that. That's something that I try to stress for students, and I encourage them not to utilize bullet points at the end of, and utilize periods at the end of bullet points, because one, it gets sloppy, and two, it's not grammatically correct because you're not utilizing personal pronouns, which means that there's no subject and the subject is implied, which technically means that the bullet point is a fragment. So, long story short, don't use bullet points, or don't use periods at the end of bullet points. So, sorry to harp on that for so long. So organizing effectively. So organization can be really key in your resume. So headers can be your education, it can be your leadership experience, your relevant experience, work experience. And you're asking me like, well, what's the difference between relevant experience and work experience, right? So relevant experience could be experience working on social media campaigns, working in your digital media class. It could be projects that you've done, right? That are all related to social media, which is the job you're applying for, right? Work experience could be your job at Starbucks, could be your seasonal lifeguard job, right? Those are experiences that are important and they do, have a lot of value, but they might not be as important to this particular application because they're not directly relevant to your social media experience. I hope that makes sense. So I think you can really utilize these headers well if you want to utilize that relevant experience section and put it right underneath your education section, right? Because then you can have the most important experiences as close to the top as possible, right? So again, the only hard and fast rule on headers is that making sure your experiences are organized from most recent to least recent. So that's reverse chronological order. Take a sip real quick. So I haven't talked a lot about hard skills versus soft skills yet. So some folks decide to include a skills section in their resume. I think that's completely fine. So what I want to say is that I want your skills section to include only hard skills. So hard skills are those technical certifications, machine operations, programming. If you have proficiency in languages or fluency in languages, those are what we call hard skills. Soft skills, which are really important. I'm definitely not trying to bash on soft skills at all, but I don't want to see in your skills section that you're a good communicator, that you're flexible or adaptable, that you work well on a team, because I should be seeing those skills shine through in your experiences. So you should be telling me about times that you worked well on a team of 6 people to complete a project that got that enhanced the company's productivity, right? That's something that shows me that you can communicate, that you have time management skills, you have teamwork skills. Those should really be shining through in your experiences and not necessarily just listed in a skills section. If that doesn't make sense, like please chat me and I will explain a little bit more. So also, your skills section is another really good way for you to tailor your resume to exactly what the employer needs. So if the employer is saying that they need someone skilled in Adobe and they need someone who can manage Twitter accounts and Facebook accounts and Instagram accounts, that needs to be in your hard skills section, making sure you're meeting those needs exactly if you have them, right? No fudging. Again, take those hints from the job descriptions, utilize those keywords, and organize your information most relevantly. So if your skills section, if you meet every single one of the technical skills that they request in their job description, making sure your skill section is up at the top or is right below your education section as far up as you can, because what we want to do is we want to keep them rating, right? We want to put the most relevant information up as high as we can go. Awesome. So we're getting to the end. So we're going to be talking about proofreading, which is huge. So making sure you're getting at least one other person to look at your resume. That can be me. That can be a trusted faculty member, a mentor, a friend. I would recommend it to be somebody that you really, really trust, because once you've been looking at your resume for a couple hours, which I expect that's kind of what it takes to produce a really great resume, you might be filling in a word or auto-correcting a misspelled word when it's not actually there. And so somebody else might be able to catch those mistakes and make sure that you're submitting your best self. You want to keep your descriptions clear and concise. You want to limit to one page. We want to make sure that's a full page. So I can show you some other concepts that might take up a little bit more space for you if you are a little bit lacking on content. And then we want to use a simple, easy to read font. Do not print on both sides. Make sure utilize. So references is something I didn't mention. So in the past, it was really common for you to include references on your resume. Now, with a lot of online applications, there's going to be a specific place for you to input those references, or you can include them on a separate page. Putting references available upon request is no longer a trend, and we want to make sure your resume is just all about you, all about your experiences. And if you have really quality experiences, we know it's likely you're going to have really good references as well. So that does not need to be included on your resume anymore. And like I said, enlist the help of others. Your faculty, your staff are all here to see you succeed, and we want you to get that internship, and we want you to represent Texas State and our department well. So we are here to help you, even if it's just a glance over. So I do want to, provide you with a few of our resources. So again, there's my email. It's wolfdaphne@texasstate.edu. You can make an appointment via handshake with me, or you can email me directly. We'll set up a time. If you haven't been here, we are on the 5th floor of the LBJ Student Center. We are still doing face-to-face appointments, but we will be socially distant. I can also do virtual appointments as well. So I'm happy to meet with you whenever we can. We also have a 48-hour resume and a cover letter review. That is 48 business hours. So if you submit it Friday night at midnight, it is not going to start being reviewed until Monday morning. So making sure you don't need it ASAP. Again, just feel free to email me. I'm always a resource for you guys, and I want to make myself as available as possible. So I do want to ask if you have any questions for me. Any concerns about the job search? Anything like that?
Actually, I have a question.
Yeah.
And I guess it would kind of be, sort of obvious, but in your experience from the best resumes you've seen, have those went on to get the best jobs?
I mean, it really depends. I think, it depends on, it depends on how you quantify the best. I think people who put in a lot of time and a lot of effort into the materials that they submit for each position each individual position, they definitely have more success than if you create a blanket resume and a blanket cover letter and just send it out wherever. So if you're putting more individualized effort into each one and making sure you're tailoring each resume, each cover letter to the position, you're going to have greater success than someone who's just applying with the same generic letters.
Okay, perfect. Thank you.
Yeah, good question. I know one other question I get a lot is, especially from like sophomores, is how long should you keep your high school information on there? And the answer to that is basically after your first year, we need to get all of your things from high school off of your resume. We really think by your sophomore year, you should be getting involved in positioning yourself on campus to being really involved in student organizations and, you know, coursework, projects within your classes, and starting to apply for those internships. So the exceptions to that is if you do have a really relevant internship that maybe you did between your senior year and your freshman year of college, that might be something you include. Another thing that you can always leave on your resume is if you're an Eagle Scout. So those Eagle Scouts out there can keep that on their resume forever.
So I've actually never heard that you're supposed to take references off of the resume now. And I recently had to do a resume for this class that I'm in, and he made us have at least 3 references. So is that something that we could add on to like a cover letter? What do you necessarily mean by a separate sheet? I guess could you maybe like elaborate on that a little bit?
Definitely. Yeah, that is a really good question. And I think you have gotten a really good first taste of tailoring your cover letter to who you're submitting it to. That, you know, if you have a professor who wants it done a specific way, that's great. I love that professors are wanting students to start thinking about their professional life after this, right? But it's also tailoring it to what that professor might need. In the future, you might choose to submit it to a professional organization, which you might want to change it up a bit. So submitting it as a separate sheet, what I recommend doing is utilizing the same format as your resume. So, but deleting all of the content underneath your header, right? So you're going to keep your name and your contact information, and likely most times there's like a line or something or a really clear divide underneath your name. And then below that, you can list your 3 to 5 references, however many that you want to include. So that includes their name, their title, their email address, and a phone number. Does that help?
Yes.
Awesome. And like I said, you know, it's likely that you're going to input that information again into a separate form whenever you're applying, but having a already made sheet that you could submit, you know, with your resume is great too. What is more important?
Yeah, it looks like we have we'll get right to that. It looks like we had one before that. There was a question asked, did you ever talk about a graphical design resume versus a Word document?
I did not, but I definitely can. So I love advising these students. I love advising Mass Comm students because you are all so creative and so talented. What I've seen shortcomings though is when students put the quality of their creative talents ahead of content. And that's where I see students really do themselves a disadvantage, because I see students with a really beautiful resume. You know, I know they put a lot of time, they put a lot of effort into it, and I don't know when they're graduating. And that's something that is really key for an employer to know, and they're not necessarily describing their experiences as well. So what I like to recommend for students is for them to know their audience. So if you're applying to a firm that is going to really appreciate your creative efforts going into your resume, go for it, right? If you might be applying to a tech company or a banking institution that for a marketing position there, they might appreciate having a little bit more standardized resume in a Word document with a link out to your portfolio, right? So there are differences in your audience, and I think that's the most important thing for you to realize. But I always, always, always content over quality of design in my mind, because your resume should be explaining who you are and your experiences and what you could bring to an organization, and not just one aspect of you. They're hiring all of you, not just the creative you. Okay, I've got 2 questions over here. So what is more important to a hiring manager, the cover letter or the resume? I'm going to put these both together, and do you recommend having a cover letter? So the answer to do you recommend having a cover letter? Yes, always submit a cover letter to any job you're applying for. And what is more important to a hiring manager, resume versus cover letter? I can't give you a straight answer on that one. It's going to depend on the organization and on the person. Some folks see all of the materials that you're submitting as writing samples, which I think is important for you to think about. This is how you're communicating yourself, all your experiences, why you're interested in the role, and who you are professionally, right? So that's important for you to present well and easily communicated, right? So I can't say that one is better than the other. I think both you need to put a lot of effort into both documents. It is true that some people look at your resume more closely, and they look at your cover letter as like, cool, they checked the box, they did it, right? So it's going to depend to the person, and unfortunately, that's just something that career services can't even know. Only really the people who are in that room deciding can know. One thing I will say though is, if you are applying to a job and you have a stack of materials of about 100 candidates, and it is, collectively probably 200 or 300 pages worth of documents, they're not looking to hire somebody out of that stack in the first round, in the first go through. They're looking how to eliminate people. So making sure that you're putting in a lot of effort, you're getting it reviewed, you're getting another set of eyes on it is really important, because a grammatical mistake, a misspelling, a formatting error could put you in that no pile, right? Once you get around 20 or so candidates that you're seriously considering, that's when they're starting to look for people. They're in the mindset where they're looking to hire someone, right? But first round, they're looking to eliminate people from the process. Those are really good questions, though. Of course, Tatiana. Any other questions about the resume process? Can I get a thumbs up and a thumbs down of how many of you were already doing some of the things that I talked about in my presentation today and your resume? Tatiana, cool, good. Celeste, thank you. Madison, awesome. All right, and give me a little celebratory, the ta-da, emoji, if there's anything that you're gonna take and put into your resume now. Awesome, Madison. Cool, we got Skylar, Tatiana, awesome.
And also, since we got a few of those ta-das going, can you actually tell everyone how they can actually set up an appointment with career services and talk to you guys?
Definitely. Yeah, so you can, I'm gonna type my email out into the chat box. So it's wolfdaphne@texasstate.edu. You can feel free to email me directly. You can also respond to those weekly emails I send out. So hopefully my name looks a little bit familiar because you should be getting an email from me just about every week. So you can respond directly to that, or you can go to Jobs for Cats and set up an appointment yourself there, or you can call our office. So you have so many avenues to get to me. Reaching out to me directly is probably the quickest way. I respond to emails as soon as I get them. And so I really try to be as available as possible to y'all. And I know y'all are, some of you are close to graduation, some of you are just like trying to, submit an application. So I try to respond as fast as possible or communicate when I will be getting back to you. Yes, thank you. Thank you, Nicole. That is our phone number for our front office.
Most definitely. So I want to go ahead and just thank everyone for being here. Of course, thank Daphne for her time. And also for everyone, if you want to catch this session again or get some information on our last few sessions we have for the day, you can visit texasstate.com/MC Week to catch all of that. And again, I want to thank all you guys for being here. And y'all have a nice rest of y'all's day.
Thank y'all.